just kind of want to sink into that Avinu Malkeinu for a little bit. As some of you might know, since becoming the emeritus rabbi, I spend many hours of my week working with a hospice agency that hired me as a spiritual counselor. I have the gift of being an equal partner in a team for each patient, including a nurse, a social worker, and a certified personal caregiver. I also meet people I never would have encountered in the Jewish professional part of my career. Hospice and palliative care is a humbling endeavor. For some of my patients, I am a surrogate for their families who live far away, and even for those whose families are closer, but due to a variety of personal issues, don't visit very much, if at all. For others, I'm a person who comes with no agenda, just to listen. And for others, I'm a bit of an accompaniment to a challenging part of life's path. I began this work with some confidence born out of my more than 40 years of experience as Beth Shir Shalom's rabbi, which certainly included visiting congregants when they were ill at home or in the hospital. I should not have been so self-assured. Hospice and palliative care are different from anything I've previously done. First of all, I don't know these people. Of course, I come to know them over time if they can interact, but we didn't have the benefit of a relationship before they fell ill and ended up on my list of patients. I often get to know one or more of their family members as well. I quickly learned that my role was to fit into their lives and their complex circumstances in a way that would be most helpful to them. At times, this means hearing that they aren't interested in a visit from a non-denominational spiritual counselor. I admit, at first, I took those rejections personally. I'm not proud of that reaction. I've developed a more sophisticated response over time. I realized I was seeing people through the lens of my job description, my background, and honestly, my ego. Not through their lens, as complex human beings who are dealing with various physical and emotional discomforts, and who didn't want someone they didn't know coming into their space and leaping instantaneously into a conversation about spirituality. My chaplaincy teacher, Blake Arnall, told me there is a particular problem for clergy that is even more intense among rabbis. Rabbis love to hear themselves talk, he said. He was right. You think it's true that if you get two Jews in a room, you have at least 3 opinions? You should try a room full of rabbis. Actually, it only takes 1 rabbi. My role as a hospice palliative spiritual counselor is not to give answers. My role is to be an involved, sympathetic, empathetic listener. Becoming that listener is still a work in progress. I am markedly better than I was 3 years ago. I learned from my coworkers and most notably from my patients. As the Talmud teaches in the name of both Rabbis Hanina and Yehuda Hanassi, much Torah have I studied from my teachers, and I have learned more from my colleagues than from them, and I've learned more from my patients, from my students. My patients are my teachers. They are showing me how to be more empathic. Every patient is unique. As the writer Robin Wall Kimmerer writes in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, perhaps there is no such thing as rain, only raindrops, each with its own story. One of my patients is a Jewish woman who recently turned 101. The oldest one that we have now is 107. The family history of my Jewish patient isn't clear, but somehow she evaded the concentration and extermination camps in the Shoah and escaped Hungary. I consider her to be a Holocaust survivor nonetheless. We visit on Thursdays, but we pretend it's Shabbat. I sing all the Shabbos melodies I can think of, especially the ones with a little Eastern European background, a little tom, a little sound. And when she says anything, she speaks in a language all her own. She articulates seemingly unrelated syllables to the listener, and they often have a cadence and a rhyme and a rhythm, and even sometimes a little melody inside of them. Puta, puta, shu, do not do tafyu. She is quieter than she was a year ago, frequently beginning our sessions just staring at me, or perhaps at nothing at all. Her son and daughter are usually there. During one of my most recent visits, she started to rock back and forth to the rhythm of the music, and then she began to clap her hands, very much to the beat. And she smiled, and she laughed. And when this happens, I look at her children, and her children look at me, and we grab all the celebration we can get in that moment. A patient recently assigned to me is half the age of my Holocaust survivor, and she is suffering primarily from complications brought on by just one chemotherapy treatment. From that treatment, she became extremely ill, extremely quickly. She almost died. She has decided that she will not receive further chemotherapy and will go it alone, eating healthfully and listening to her own body. She is a physician, and she is determined to be self-reliant for the rest of her life. She knows that her life could end at any moment, and she is ready. I am younger than 101, and I'm older than the patient I just mentioned. I can't help but be aware of my mortality as I go through my day. The Talmud tells us a story about a particular rabbi that hits me where I work and where I live. Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana used to say a short prayer when entering and leaving the house of study. They asked him, "What's the purpose of this prayer?" He told them, "When I enter, I pray that I should not be the cause of any problems. And when I leave, I give thanks for my portion." I didn't know this little piece of rabbinic wisdom before I began working as a spiritual counselor. It is a beautiful description of what goes on inside of me as I walk into a patient's home or the facility in which they reside. Now that Rabbi Nehunia's story is part of me, I try to keep his simple and important philosophy in my pocket all day long. I try to find only positive things to say to my patients, listening for subtle invitations from them to tell me more and to be grateful for the circumstances of my own life. That latter part of my inner work should not occur in comparison to the life conditions of my patients. Gratitude isn't really pure if it comes at the expense of someone's suffering or difficulties. This bit of Talmud brings me to words of wisdom from my late father-in-law, Lenny Comas, something I unequivocally see as worthy of inclusion in the Talmud. He used to say, Getting old isn't for sissies. I haven't met any sissies in my work. In fact, I'm almost constantly overwhelmed by the courage and the strength and the hope that I encounter. What could possibly be the source of this courage? My patients couldn't all be the bravest heroes capable of coming to their own rescue. These are ordinary folk, like those individual raindrops. Each of them has their own story, a unique journey, heading, like it will for all of us other raindrops, towards the inevitability of hitting the ground. What will be their fate? Will they be directly absorbed into the earth? Or will they first fall into a street or sidewalk? Will they form a puddle with other drops to become a drinking fountain for birds? In the end, it's all the same. In the end, despite our uniquenesses, aren't we all the same? Rabbi Israel Salanter, who began the Musar movement, which is the study and practice of Jewish moralistic and ethical teachings, said, "No sickness is more dangerous than losing hope." How can my patients, those regular raindrops, who are so near that final segment of their fall, still live with hope? Enjoy a bite of food. Be visibly uplifted when visited by a friend or family member, or even by me, singing some music or praying a prayer in their own prayer tradition that hopefully will give them some strength. How do they choose to struggle with so much vigor and optimism as their bodies and souls are capable of in these incredibly difficult circumstances? What's so wonderful about what I'm privileged to witness in my patients is that what I see isn't rare or random. It's very common, everyday heroism. Its regularness astonishes me. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. Why am I, in my relative health, not more appreciative of every grain, of every moment in which I get to breathe and walk and speak and interact with others, receive love, and do my best to give love? Do I need to reach the very conclusion of my life to have enough perspective and enough clarity to feel the precious and priceless value of existing for a while as a conscious human being? I hope not. And I'm deeply grateful to my patients who model the best of this for me without intending to model at all. John Donne wrote, "Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind." All of my patients' deaths touch me because their lives touch me. Even more so, I realize there are other people out there whose lives and deaths I will never know, and I'm involved with them as well. Isn't this how we should all feel all the time? It's like that great scene in the first Star Wars movie that was released. I don't know if you remember this. It was a while ago. But in that movie, an entire planet was destroyed. And in another corner of the universe was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he went like this. And he said, "I think there's been a huge reduction in the Force." shouldn't we all feel those reductions when they occur? And in that sense, it may seem like I'm asking for the impossible, but I'm not. President Biden, in his recent speech to the UN General Assembly, quoted Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." About a year and a half ago, my 100-year-old patient became infected with COVID. Nobody expected her to survive until she did. I've watched everyone around some of my patients buckle down for the worst until they got better. One patient was extremely weak and lethargic. I would come in to sing and pray with her, and she would peek out from beneath the covers. And she would do that even on the warmest days in Upper Van Nuys, covered up. None of us on her team had any hope for her. The last time I saw her was for me to come and say goodbye because she was dying, we thought, but she was getting better. When I arrived at her room, she wasn't in her bed, and my heart dropped. I got an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach that something happened and she had to turn for the worse. I looked around the facility and found her sitting at the dining table, feeding herself some cake. And then she asked for seconds. We all thought this was impossible until it was done. She wasn't done. There was still cake in the world, and she was going to eat it until she couldn't. John Donne's reminder of the inextricable link between our lives ends with his famous ominous warning to stop asking who died when we hear a bell tolling. It tolls for thee, it tolls for you, he said. My patients die. We all will. Before the inevitable happens, let's live our best, thinking of and doing for others, closely known or somewhere in that great tapestry of humanity. Let us give more than we take, and let's be grateful for what we receive. Above all, let us feel the heartbeats of others, and let us live with hope and resolve. And when we reach the end, may our unintelligible syllables be rhythmical, and may they rhyme. And may our last exhale create an everlasting song of love and caring and empathy among us, both our beloveds and those we don't know, as we float and occasionally soar in and out with everything that shares the breath of life. Amen. Now, when I see my patients, and they won't get too distracted by me playing guitar, I bring in my guitar. And, most of my patients are not Jewish, so I have to sing other things. I want Jesus to walk with me. I'm pretty good at it. I always like gospel. Now I get to really sing it. But other times I sing things that, anybody can access and anybody can remember. And this is one of them. It's a song that had a very circuitous route to its popularity, but there it is. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom, me and you. I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies are blue, clouds are white, bright blessed day, dark sacred night. I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, also on the faces of the people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. Think to myself, wonderful world. Yeah, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.